Brighty of the Grand Canyon, Moon Lily Tea. When all the dishes were put away in the cupboard and the salt house cleaned, a hush spread over the room. Homer was working on his snowshoes, and Iron sat staring into the fire, screening his face from the others. Uncle Jim broke the silence, chuckling. "Now our bellies is plumb full and everything's nice and tidied," he said to Brighty. "Let's me and you cozy up for the night." He spread his blankets on the floor, and sitting down, he pulled off a stocking and drew it back and forth between his toes. "Here I be, feeling good and noble-like," he sighed, "just 'cause I made a little old Jack happy. Don't it beat all how righteous a feller feels after doing a little mucking out?" Uncle Jim expected no answer, and got none. He wriggled down into his blankets and lay on his back, laughing up at Brighty, who kept circling him, trying to make up his mind where to settle. "You know, Bright Angel," he said, "this is the first time I ever see you in your winter coat, and it sure is frowsy. You get woolly curls on your forehead, and over your eyes it looks exactly like a thatched roof, don't it, fellers?" "Sure does," Homer agreed, as he interlaced the canvas strips of his snowshoes. Irons grunted in his throat at all the talk of Brighty. He got up to get more wood, and as he passed, the burros shied out of reach. "Hey," Uncle Jim raised up on one elbow, "why's Brighty so skittish o' ye?" Jake Irons did not answer at once. "Why, he floundered at last. "He's jumpy from being starved, same as me. Yeah, that's it." The old man's jaws clamped, and his hands made sure of the six-shooter by his side. He turned now to Homer and saw the weary flush of the boy's face. "Quit working, son, and blow out the candle. Tomorrow's another day. Let me see." His voice went drowsy. "We got chuck to last 3-4 days. Then we got to light out for better or worser." Homer and Irons bedded down in their corners, with Uncle Jim and Brighty on the imaginary dividing line. Quiet again filled the room, save for a small, steady ticking. And then, just as Homer's lips made an O to blow the candle, Irons took out the gold watch and began winding. Uncle Jim's heart started knocking against his ribs. The room suddenly seemed to contract. There was nothing in it but the gold watch, like some meteor flashing out of the past. In his mind's eye, he was down in the canyon, seeing Old-Timer with the same watch, winding, winding, winding. Old-Timer's murderer, here, in this very room, a big, bold, easy target. The ticking grew louder, like a hammer striking on steel. Uncle Jim flattened his back to the floor, his hands feeling for the revolver. He remembered the sheriff's promise. "We'll capture him, dead or alive." "Dead," Uncle Jim's lips formed the word. "Dead it'll be." His fingers tightened on the gun. As he began pulling it out of the blanket, he felt a squirming at his back. It was only Brighty snuggling and settling closer, but the movement jolted the old man's thoughts. Who'd be the murderer then? Who? Me. Uncle Jimmy. And he thought, death's too easy. He's got to atone. Me and Brighty'll pack him out alive. He saw the watch now held to Jake Irons' ear. Saw it return to his pocket. Saw him cover himself with a blanket strangely familiar and get ready for sleep. Them little pin eyes, Uncle Jim thought, pack rat's eyes. His mind began pacing back and forth. Suddenly it pounced on an idea, and he reached around, patting Brighty as if thanking him for the interruption. "It'll work," he said to himself, with fierce determination. He waited until his angry trembling was over and his breathing steadied. Then into the silence he forced a belch. It was a big, gusty belch, and it was followed by another, even louder. "My stomach's kind of queasy-like," he said, throwing off his blankets. "That bacon grease seems to have gagged me. Guess I'll brew up a pot of moon lily tea. I recollect seeing a packet of pods." He went over to the cupboard to get them. "You all just lay there, and I'll give you some when it's done." He opened the outside door a crack, filled the coffee pot with snow, and set it over the fire. "The Pute Indians thought a heap of moon lily tea," he went on, his breath slow and even now. "Used it for the stomach and other troubles. Wished we had us some canned milk, but it's flavory even this way." He remembered to belch again, and then he made a great racket, setting out the tin cups to be sure no one fell asleep. "Either of you fellers feel sick?" he asked. "Not me," Homer said. When the tea was ready, Uncle Jim handed a steaming cup to Homer and one to Irons. Then he sat down alongside Brighty to sip his own. "Get your nose out of this," he laughed. This here's one thing ain't good for man and beast." "Why, it tastes nice," Homer pronounced, "and to think it was here all the time." Irons gulped noisily and set the empty cup on the floor. "It's a queer thing about this moon lily tea," Uncle Jim said. "The Paiutes had a great use for it asides for the stomach." He interrupted himself with a belch. "Now take, for instance, if some thief stole a hoss." "What then?" Homer asked. "Then," Uncle Jim said, "they'd find a way to get a cup of this here tea into him, and in a little while the tea'd loosen his tongue and he just couldn't stop babbling. He'd tell 'zactly where he stole that hoss and where he'd hid it." "Honest?" Homer asked, and added, "I'm glad I ain't stole nothing." He hesitated. "'Cept once I took some overripe peaches out of an orchard down to Fredonia." "By thunder!" Uncle Jim slapped his leg in delight. "You're still guzzling your tea, and already you're confessing. The Paiutes used to say big crime take longer." There was a moment or two of silence before Uncle Jim pointed his revolver at Irons and asked, "How about ye, Jake? Tea beginning to sweat out any thieving or killing? How about a murder? You ever hear of Old Timer?" Irons choked and his face went purple red. The questions were striking into him like barbed arrows. He tried to get up, but he only writhed in his blankets, hands held against his stomach. I've been poisoned, he screamed. "It was Old Timer's fault, his own fault." Words poured out in a torrent. "He was there on that ledge, and I aimed to pass, and his footing give away, and he fell splash into the river." "And p'raps," Uncle Jim's voice was slowly measured, "p'raps his footing give way 'cause you pushed him? Just a little? Irons?" Irons' voice shrilled. No, 'twas only a little nudge I give him, and he made a death scream, and he was bobbing in the water like a piece of wood, and then he got sucked under." "You awake, Homer?" "Yes, Uncle Jim." "Willing to be my witness, Homer?" "Yes, sir." "And so you stole his watch, Irons?" "He hadn't no need for it. The sheriff came and another old coot, and I weren't going to give them the watch. That old other coot was me, Irons." Terror caught at the man. He tried to stop his lips with the back of his hand, but the tumble of words rushed out. "That Old Timer," he shrieked hysterically, "could have kept his old rocks. They never paid off." Uncle Jim's eyes were cold and mocking. "Now ain't that just too bad? Here I thought 'twas a nice big vein like the one bulging on your forehead." Irons clasped his head. No, his voice rose to the breaking point. "That rifle?" Uncle Jim demanded. "Where'd you throw the gold plate on it?" In the fire! "At a cabin back a ways in the meadow?" The man screeched his "Yes." Still holding the revolver on Irons, Uncle Jim walked backward, skirting around Brighty. He took his own rifle off the cupboard and gave it to Homer. "We'll have to stand watches on this scoundrel," he said to the boy, "till we can hand him over to the law. As for ye, Jake Irons, one move and that loose clapper o' your tongue will be stopped for good." As Homer took the rifle, a change came over him, an almost man-grown look. He pointed it at Irons and settled himself ready to shoot. "By the way," he asked after a while, "how's your stomach feel now, Uncle Jim?" For answer, the old man threw his arms around Brighty's neck and laughed into the shaggy hair. "Moon lily tea, me eye," he chortled. "Them weren't any lily pods. I gave you real green tea what I packed from Fredonia."